And that's when I started to realize that I needed to talk to people about it, because something like this, it's wrong. I mean, I can't help myself trying to help people anyway, probably too much, but it's wrong to withhold information that could genuinely impact the most important thing in anybody's life, which is their health. And so the reason why, sort of one of the main reasons why I was really keen to talk to you and hope that you would broadcast this is that I know that every year hundreds of thousands of people have the surgery I had. And I know that every year hundreds of thousands of people around the world are told not to eat a carnivore diet, are told that they need to eat this carbohydrate-rich, sugar-rich diet, and it's absolutely the wrong thing. I mean, it's so wrong. And I just wanted people to know that I eat steak.
Lorna, how did you find carnivore?
Through my son. I have two sons, and my oldest is a paramedic, and my youngest has recently left the army. He was an officer in the Royal Logistic Corps, and he's struggled with a number of things through certainly through lockdown and COVID, and he put weight on, but he also got serious anxiety. I mean, really, really quite bad anxiety, and they were trying to treat that allopathically and through therapy, and it wasn't working for him at all. It wasn't, and he realised that he was actually addicted to carbs. And he just started looking for something. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just started looking. And he came across keto, first of all, by accident on YouTube. And he came across Dr. Paul Mason. And so he started really listening to all his lectures that he delivered, and it's just how wonderful is it that people like him upload these things to the internet, and people like us can, free of charge at any time, turn on that little university in the corner of our living rooms and watch this kind of stuff. So that's how he came across it, and then he started to tell me how much better he was feeling because he went keto. And I had got at the time some kind of health anxiety, which I will explain further if you like, but not at this point. So I've got that. And I was in a pretty desperate state, and I thought, I'll give it a go. So I started with keto. And I did that for probably about 5 months, I think. And it did make a difference to quite a number of things, actually. And then George came to visit, and he said, right, I want you to watch this. So he sat me down in front of YouTube, and I had to watch this carnivore stuff. And I have a healthcare background. My background is critical care, urgent care, and mental health. And here I was hearing what was diametrically opposed to not just everything I had learned, but everything I had said. And I struggled with that because, it was serious internal conflict. And I felt so guilty as well that I had absorbed for years all these beliefs and teachings that were harming people. Anyway, the more I looked and the more I thought, the more I realized that it was this carnivore thing had something going for it. So I thought, well, look, I keep hearing people like Dr. Chafee saying for hundreds of thousands of years, mankind has not just survived, but they've thrived on this diet. And the logical side of you says there has to be something in this. So there was that, plus there was the, look, Lorna, you've tried everything else and that ain't working. So I thought there's nothing to be lost in doing this for 30 to maybe 90 days. So that's how I came to it. And with what happened as a result of that, I will never leave it.
Wow. So just to clarify, how long has it been that you've been on carnivore now?
Since July the 4th last year. Oh, that's my.
Oh,
I just
wow.
realised that's my my like America. That's my liberation day.
Yeah, it's your Independence Day, right? Um, okay, so I mean, this is a really cool way to find it. You know, it's just kind of you didn't go searching for this. Um, it just it basically keto fell in your lap, and then you graduated from there based on what you heard. Um, what has changed for you, and what is this? What is the big reason you won't go back?
It's such a long list, honestly. I'm 69, so I have a long collection of health issues because I have eaten a standard Western diet for so long. That said, I've actually been I was probably on a diet, a restrictive diet, for the bulk of my life because that's what women do, especially in the Western world where you're supposed to look like Twiggy. I grew up in the Twiggy era, so I've done every diet going and been flipping miserable. It has to be said for great chunks of my life because it's all been about denial and restriction and just being hungry all the time, and it's an interesting hunger. It's not. I did the raw vegetable diet for ages, so I was vegan for quite a period of time, and I was ill all the time that I was vegan. I used to have to go to the surgery once a month to have vitamin injections, which is basically B12 and other stuff, having that injected in my bottom once a month for many years because I was ill on this diet. Um, and the hunger is you're full, but you're empty. It's hollow. It's a really difficult way to describe it. And the only time I ever satisfied that hunger was when I had protein. So my diet was really protein poor for many years. So along the way, I had infertility problems. So when I got married, I spent 4 years going to some fertility clinic because I had all sorts of hormonal issues. I had 3 operations during that as well because they were doing exploratory stuff and looking at all sorts of issues. And on the third operation, I reacted to the muscle relaxant, a drug called suxamethonium, and I had cardiac arrest 3 times, anaphylaxis, and I came very close to dying. And so, the reason I'm saying this is because this is an indication of how serious this stuff gets. How serious does poor diet get? Anyway, so that was one of the things. So I've had a history of hormonal issues. I did eventually get pregnant. I had my first son when I was 30 and my second when I was 37, but it wasn't easy. And my family has a history of something called lipedema, which is like a fat disease. I have 2 sisters, both overweight. My youngest sister is morbidly obese to the point where she is immobile completely, can't walk across a room, literally, because she has secondary lymphedema to the lipedema. And so she is literally unable to walk. So I kept mine in check because I've restricted so much over the years. So there was that. I have migraines. I've had migraines since the age of 15. I've twice been hospitalized because of migraines. On one occasion, I had something called a transient global amnesia. And when the paramedics came to collect me, I thought I'd had a TIA, a mini stroke. But I hadn't. What had happened was when you can have a really bad migraine that literally switches off your memory writing ability in your brain and affects the amygdala. So that's what happened, and it took 24 hours for my memory to recover. There's still great chunks of around that time that I don't remember. So I used to have, as I was saying, very severe migraines. For a while, I was a director in the NHS, and I used to chair meetings. We're drugged up to the eyeballs. So to do what I called the Holy Trinity, which was codeine, paracetamol, and ibuprofen, max strength, all three at the same time. And that was the only way that I could function. So I had to get my PA to drive me everywhere because I shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car. So yeah, migraines were a really big issue for me, and I would sometimes have 2 or 3 a week, and they would last for ages. And I had arthritis, etc., etc. But the real biggie, was when I had cancer. So I was diagnosed 12 years ago with gastroesophageal cancer, and the cancer was the tumor was on the junction of my esophagus and my stomach. And I had chemotherapy. Well, to begin with, I was diagnosed as having terminal cancer because they thought I had a secondary tumor in my liver. So they did nothing for 6 weeks at all. And they told me they could only do palliative care. So I prepared everything because they reckoned I wasn't going to make the 5 months. But because of my job, and because I was still seeing my former colleagues, as soon as they told me I was going to die, I resigned. So because I was still seeing my former colleagues, I was very lucky that one of them said, "You don't look ill enough to have liver cancer. You're skinny, but you don't look ill enough to have liver cancer." And so he referred my notes, with my permission, to a colleague of his. And that started the journey of everybody saying, "No, actually, what you've got in your liver is an anatomical anomaly. It's got nothing to do with cancer." And so then it was kind of rush to start me on the treatment. So the first thing was chemotherapy. Vile stuff, absolutely vile. I had something called ECX, which is these 3 drugs that are really aggressive, really, really aggressive. But because I was so thin, they said to me, "You need to put weight on because we're going to do surgery and we need you to put 5 kilos on in 3 weeks." They're very good at this. They have all these nutritionists and dietitians to help people to lose weight, but they don't know how to tell you to put weight on. So what they do is they give you the reverse of how you lose weight. They say do the opposite. See? And so then the opposite is eat anything that's kind of calorie dense, which is carbohydrates and fats and sugars, but not good fats, just any old fat really. So because I was having difficulty swallowing things because the tumour was restricting my ability to swallow, I was living on biscuits because anything you could crunch up or that you could turn into a liquid, I could swallow. So I literally would have, I don't know whether or not you have them in Japan or in Australia or wherever your audience lives, but in this country, we have tins of biscuits. And we have something called, it's called family assortment. And in this tin, you've got chocolate biscuits and custard creams and bourbons, which are like custard creams, only chocolate variety, and something called jammy dodgers, which are a sandwich, which is this sort of icing stuff with a bit of jam, gooey jam on the top. So you've got all those, just pure rubbish. And I would sit with one of these tins next to me in front of the television and just keep going. Because the good thing about biscuits in that situation is you never feel full up. So you can keep going. So that's basically what they told me to do. Ice cream, anything with cheese sauce and all that kind of stuff. So I did put on my 5 kilos in 3 weeks, actually. But I also grew my tumour because that's what tumours live on. So all the chemotherapy that I was taking that was effectively killing me, and it did make me very ill, was just a complete waste of time. And so they stopped the chemotherapy. Then they did the surgery, and that was, I was very, very lucky. The surgeon, who was an amazing chap, and big shout out to Mr. Chung, who lives in Singapore now. He amazing team, really brilliant team. He told me that he had 0.2 millimeter margin to work with. That's how close we were to it being a disaster. So I had the surgery. There I was in hospital trying to get strong and well. And he literally said to me, Lorna, I need to get you home because you need nutrition and you're not going to get that here. It's a good old NHS food. So I went home within, I think, 5 days. I was home. And so I followed what I was told to eat, which was pretty much what I was told to eat before. Ice cream, custard, cheese sauce, anything that was kind of slide and glide. Overcook pasta to the point where it's mush. Eat that, all that kind of stuff. Don't eat meat because your system will not be able to process it. If you do have meat, you can only have ground up stuff. So have things like ground chicken and anything that is really, really mushy. So I did that, carried on doing that. I was back at work within 5 months, and I was working for an air ambulance charity at the time, so I was involved in trauma work, and it was fairly intense, as you can imagine. So I did that. I was in constant pain. I had pain every minute of every day, gastric pain. I was bloated. I had something called dumping syndrome, which means your food hits your intestines too fast. So your body dumps a load of fluid into your intestines really quickly. And you have effectively a hyperglycemic episode. And your intestines just say, we've got to get rid of this stuff now. And it's incredibly painful. And I could literally just pass out. You would just be, I couldn't see, I couldn't stand up straight. It was like having a diabetic episode. So I was having that all the time. And so I couldn't go for a long walk without somebody being with me because that might happen at any time. So I carried glucose tablets and Mars bars, that sort of thing, to deal with those episodes when they happened. Completely the wrong thing. But anyway, that's what we were all told. So that carried on for a number of years, and then I went through a number of different work roles, and they were all exhausting because of what I do. So for a period of time, I was working with eating disorders, and I was all over the country. So I was on television a lot, and I was doing speaking at universities, etc., etc. And it was just exhausting. I was just really, really drained. And then my last job, I was working in, it was a standalone A&E department in the middle of nowhere, actually. And that was really hard work as well. So I was constantly tired, constantly exhausted because my body wasn't getting the nutrition that it needed. And because my new arrangement, which is I have esophagus to about here, I don't know whether you can see where I'm pointing, to about here. And then from here down, I don't have any more esophagus. My stomach, they took my stomach, cut 2/3 of it away and put it in the bin. And then the other third, they turned into a tube, stapled it with titanium clips, stapled that to my esophagus. And the bottom is attached to my pylorus, I believe. So that's what I have as a new digestive arrangement in my upper GI. But the rest, obviously, of my intestinal arrangement is standard. Nothing was done to my intestines. So I am very lucky because I can eat. I don't need to have a bag or anything. I don't have to have I don't have to be fed through a peg into my intestines, which a number of people do have to. So I'm very, very lucky. I know that. But what it means is that what I can eat and how I can eat is greatly affected. And you have to relearn. I don't have a valve at the top of my stomach because that got chopped off when the rest got chopped off and binned. So when I sleep, I have to sleep at a 30-degree angle. So I sleep on a wedge. And I can never be laid flat because I can aspirate on my own gastric juices because there's nothing to stop it from coming up. So that's how my life changed. I mean, my life changed dramatically, but I'm here. So, it's all good, really. So I carried on like this, and it was all very difficult and very uncomfortable and very painful. So I had the migraines. Then I developed high blood pressure. So I was on high blood pressure drugs. Then I had a pretty unpleasant experience with a traumatic experience with a friend of mine who took her own life, and I found her, and that was awful, absolutely awful. And so as a result of that, after that, it was almost like all this stuff that had been happening over the years. Suddenly, I'd been running from it all my life and keeping in front of it. That was good. That was okay. And then suddenly it was like I stopped dead, and it all just came crashing in and hit me full force. And my poor little brain just went, nah, I can't do this anymore. And I got unbelievably anxious. I mean, it was just, and we had COVID and all of that business, and we were all locked up. I was living in the middle of the country. Both my sons were 120 miles away from me in the opposite directions. I couldn't see them. I couldn't get to them when they were ill. But weirdly, I didn't have COVID. I never had it. So all of this just came crashing in, and I had this just horrendous anxiety that was there 24 hours a day, and it manifested as a health anxiety. So I genuinely believed every second of every day that I was going to die, and my heart was just going to give up. So I got my Apple Watch so I could check my pulse rate all the time. Bought myself a little, it's called a cardio, a little ECG machine, which is equivalent just to a 2-lead ECG. So you put your fingertips on it, and it produces a cardiac readout. I've got my pulse oximeter so that I could check my SATs levels. I mean, I just had everything. I was doing my blood pressure twice a day, blah, blah, blah. I just turned into a serious hypochondriac. But it was horrible. It was really horrible. And for the first time, I fully understood what people go through when they have health issues, and particularly when they have anxiety issues. It's utterly disabling. I couldn't get behind the wheel of a car because I might die and kill somebody. I'd take the dog for a walk, and once I got a few hundred yards away from the house, I'd have to go back because I might die, and the dog might run into the road, and it was literally like this. And at night when I went to bed, I had to make sure everything was organized so that if I died in the middle of the night, the dog could get to some water, the dog could get to some food. It was just, and I was just constantly planning that I was going to die immediately. So that was the worst of all the things I had. That was the worst thing. So then when all of this happened, my son introduced me to Keto, and I saw him getting so well. I mean, I've contracted everything because an awful lot happened because I've lived a long time. But then when this happened, and I started to realize just how much impact what you put in your mouth has, not just on you physically, but on you mentally and emotionally. That's when I started to go through this serious internal conflict about, oh my God, this is completely diametrically opposed to everything I have known and believed. Belief systems are really strange things. They go really, really deep. And when belief systems get challenged, it's quite a painful process. It doesn't matter what it is, it's quite an internally painful process. So there I was, going through all of this and thinking, what have you been doing? What have you done to people? I felt really, really guilty. And then when I started to get really well and I started to go through all these improvements, I found with keto that it was too akin to the Western diet for me to be really comfortable with. Apart from that, it was difficult anyway. It was a pain in the backside, having to constantly count stuff. Although, to be honest, counting, I'm a bit of a control freak in case it hasn't come across. Counting is something I quite like. So to be on a calorie restricted diet was heaven for me because I keep counting stuff. So keto kept that going, which was not good for my mental health in terms of getting to the point where food stopped being an emotional or mental issue. That's why carnivore is great. You just eat till you feel good. That's it. Anyway, so once I got to that stage, and then moved to carnivore, and I suddenly found I didn't need drugs anymore. So I have a long list of drugs that I gave up. I gave up 11 drugs, and I wasn't seriously ill. So the kind of drugs I gave up were amitriptyline, which is something that I was given for peripheral neuropathy, which I had as a result of the chemotherapy, as a prophylaxis for migraine, and also as a general anxiety disorder combined drug. So the anxiety's gone. I woke up in the morning full of cheer, boringly so, really. I'm a morning person. I get up in the morning, it's like the dog always is. Well, it's a day, it's a whole day, which is good. I crash in the evenings because I'm not a night bird at all. So I didn't have the anxiety. That just it was almost overnight that went. Then I suddenly realised I hadn't had a migraine for ages. I haven't had a migraine since April of last year, and that was where I spent a day and a half literally curled up on a sofa, only moving to vomit, because that's how my migraines used to be. So I haven't had that since last April. That was on keto, so that was my last migraine. So I didn't need that. The peripheral neuropathy, I suddenly realised that's gone as well. I don't have that tingling in my hands anymore. I don't have the circulation issues. Then I noticed that my blood pressure was fine. So my blood pressure has dropped on carnivore to an average of 95 over low 50s. That's really good. My resting heart rate, I used to have tachycardic episodes all the time, and I could sit there for an hour with just literally sitting. Suddenly out of the blue like that, I'd go tachycardic, and my pulse rate would be running at between 130 and 150, doing nothing. My resting heart rate is between 51 and 55. I mean, that is really healthy, especially for my age. That is really low. My SATs levels always read between 99 and 100%. So if you look at just those basic markers, really, really well. So arthritis has gone. You see, I can do this now, which I couldn't do. I couldn't do buttons up. I couldn't take lids off things. So I used to line jars up along the counter in my kitchen and grab people who, when they popped in, it would be, oh, can you just come and take these lids off, please? Because I couldn't do that. I had to stop doing knitting and crochet, and I couldn't draw anymore. Just so many things I could no longer do. Picking the dog up was an issue because I had to protect my thumbs all the time. So that's all gone. You know, occasionally I might get a little bit of pain here because I have got physical damage from years of erosion. But now it's like the inflammation's gone. It's to get just shed loads of things. I could sit here and go on forever, so I won't. So I've given up all these different drugs, and one of the drugs that I gave up was lansoprazole, the morning one, because I used to have to take that twice a day. Now, lansoprazole is a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor. So what lansoprazole does is it reduces the acidity in your stomach. Well, I'm a carnivore. I need acid in my stomach. I don't have a stomach, but I have stomach tissue, so that tissue still produces acid. I think it's more important for me that I have that acid than it would be for anybody with a normal stomach, because I don't have a reservoir that sits there with food doing what it does before it goes into the rest of my digestive system. For me, it's like the food comes in and there's this shower from the sides. It probably isn't like that, but that's how I see it in my head. It's a
You
shower.
make it sound like a car wash.
Well, that's what it is. It's sort of shower from the side that comes and, sort of blasts of food, so that at least it's got something as it goes through. So I need that something to be the best possible quality it can be. So I stopped taking the morning one, and it took a while for my body to adjust. I used to have a prescription for Gaviscon. I don't need that anymore. So my GP keeps getting these emails from me saying things like, I'd like to stop taking this. And I'd like to stop taking that, which they're not very happy about, because that's not what GPs do. Anyway, so yeah, I've come off all these different drugs. So then I did the cholesterol check. So in the UK, once a year, when you get over 60, they do their health check. GPs get paid more for doing this, so they're obviously very keen to do these checks. So they did this health check, and they came back with my LDL, my serum LDL, being shockingly high. It had gone from 2 point something, because we read stuff differently in this country to America, 2 point something to 8 point something, okay, which I think in America is probably about 350, thereabouts. Yeah, so it had gone shockingly high for me. And so, my HDL had also gone up. Okay, so they were quite happy with the HDL going up. So my HDL was 2.9, I think, which in America I think would be about 87, 89, something like that. Anyway, so I got an email from the GP surgery, because they don't talk to you anymore. We don't see doctors. We just communicate. So I got this email saying, we want to offer you statins. So I went back to them and said, before I make this decision, I mean, there was no way I was going to touch a statin. I knew I didn't need that. And interestingly, this was when the information was coming out about hyperresponders. So I was waiting for that. So I wanted to know what my triglycerides were. That was the key thing for me. But they didn't check that when they took the blood. They didn't test it, because it's variable. In the UK, it's really variable what they check for when they do cholesterol check. It's not the same in every surgery. So I sent them an email saying, in order for me to make an informed decision about whether or not to take this drug, I need to know what my triglycerides are. So I said a lot more, but they ignored all of that. Anyway, so I had the triglyceride check. My triglycerides were 0.9, which in America would be about 35, 37. So my triglycerides are amazing. They're really good.
So I guess you're a lean mass hyper-responder then.
I am indeed. So when that came out and I got my triglyceride results back, I wrote to the surgery explaining that I was a lean mass hyper-responder and giving them the links to this and telling them that they also ought to go and look at Nick Norwitz's little experiment on Oreos. So they didn't reply to that.
Yeah, somehow they're not very responsive to questions and stuff like that, right?
No. I think, to be fair to GPs in this country, they get virtually no training on nutrition, and they don't understand cholesterol either. So to come back to how I got to carnivore and that journey, I have spent hours every day almost, and then every week, because after a while you start to reduce it a little bit. But I have spent, there isn't 2 days don't go by without me spending some time watching something on YouTube about carnivore. So I've got to know this whole community who don't even know that I exist, but I've got to know this entire community of people who I've become really friendly with and really close to, because they have such a dramatic impact on my life. And people, and the wonderful thing is the range of people that you engage with go from the likes of Dr. Paul Mason, who is scientific in what he does, and provides you with the ability to answer those difficult questions when people start to get, because they all think I'm mad. So when people start to get very critical of decisions that you make, all the way through to people like Rena, who is 5 Minute Body, I believe. I mean, Bella, Steak and Butter Gal, and so on. So all these different people, and Bill Knott, who I absolutely adore, who lives in Alaska, who's done so well. He really has done so well. And Kerry and his family, all of these people who come into my home on a regular basis and kind of keep me going, really, because doing something that is so alien to mainstream can be very isolating, and it can be very lonely. And so the reason why, sort of one of the main reasons why I was really keen to talk to you and hope that you would broadcast this is that I know that every year hundreds of thousands of people have the surgery I had. And I know that every year hundreds of thousands of people around the world are told not to eat a carnivore diet, are told that they need to eat this carbohydrate-rich, sugar-rich diet, and it's absolutely the wrong thing. I mean, it's so wrong. And I just wanted people to know that I eat steak, and my body processes it beautifully. You name it, I eat it if it once had a pulse. That's what I eat. I don't eat so much chicken because I just find it very bland, and I think it's nutrient light. But if you were to look in my fridge right now, I've probably got maybe 6 kilos of sirloin and a couple of kilos of ribeye steak. I put cream in my coffee. I only have 2 coffees a day, one caffeinated and one decaffeinated. And I've come to the conclusion that if I do that, that's fine. I'm not perfect. I probably shouldn't. I should probably be like Anthony Chaffee and just drink water. But, I am a sinner. So there we are. But I put cream in my coffee. I put butter in my coffee. I put salt in my coffee. I put iodine in my coffee and then blitz it. And that's my breakfast. So yeah, I eat all those things that, hard-boiled eggs as well, which I was told my body wouldn't be able to process. And my body does incredibly well with it. Thank you very much. In fact, it says thank you. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel hollow. I don't feel hungry. I wake up in the morning feeling energized. And then maybe it depends, some days about 11, some days about 2, some days not till 5, my body will go, food. And so one of the other things I eat a lot of is offcuts of fat. So I go to the butcher, and my butcher collects offcuts of lamb and beef. And I have a huge bag in my fridge at the moment, which I'm in the process of chopping up and freezing. And so I get these little bits of fat, which has also usually got little bits of meat on it as well. And I put that in the air fryer, and they're my snacks. So they are, as Dr. Elizabeth Bright would say, women, we need fat because hormonally it's good for us. So they're my healthy snacks.
Wow. So through that, I've got lots of questions. But as we're talking about food, one of the questions I've got off the top is, given the if we want to call it the remodeling they did, how does that affect your eating? Like, do you have to eat more small meals, or can you do like 2 meals a day or something? How does it work?
this is another really interesting thing. So when I was eating vegetables, and until just over a year, when was it? Yeah, until last July, I used to eat a bag of spinach a day, a small bag of spinach, because that's what I believed I was supposed to do. No wonder I had arthritis. So up until then, I I thought that my capacity for food is greatly reduced, obviously, but I thought that my capacity for food was really small because of my rearrangement. Since going carnivore, I've realized that my capacity for food is smaller when I eat vegetables than when I eat meat. And I think it's because our bodies aren't designed to process all that cellulose, and I nearly said a rude word then, and all that stuff. So instead, it sits there, and it's just like a blockage. It's a bit like when you have to clear hair out of the drain. It's just stopping everything from going through easily. So I realised that actually I can eat more, volume-wise, than I used to be able to eat. So I can sit down and eat 1.5 steaks in one sitting. We don't have well, I can buy big steaks, but a steak is probably about that size, okay, and maybe about that thick, right? I've got 2 sitting over there getting to room temperature. So yeah, so that's kind of steak size. But I can eat 1.5 of those in one sitting if I'm on a hungry day. I would never have been able to. I wouldn't even got halfway across a steak. I couldn't eat more than half a chicken breast before because I had the vegetables with it. So what I've learned is that with this new arrangement, vegetables are anything with fiber. The high fiber stuff is a serious issue. It's nutritionally, it's vacant. So all I'm doing is making my life harder by sticking this stuff into my system. So that's a message I would really love to say to people is if you want to give yourself the best and the greatest number of nutrients that you can with your new arrangement, cut the fiber out.
You sounded before like you wake up and you just go about doing your thing and your body tells you when you're hungry. So at that point you might have a steak or something like that. And then what happens? You let your body tell you if you're hungry again, or do you
Yeah.
always have a second meal?
Not always, no. Some days I'll just have fat. I don't do that too frequently because of my system. I know that I need to make sure I keep the nutrients up. Do you know that this is another really? There's a few strange things that have happened to me going carnivore. One is my hair's got darker. Now it genuinely has got darker. That's weird. I'm 69 and the greying has stopped and reversed. The other is my hair's got thicker. I can kind of see all this new hair growing here, you know. It's like sticking up all over the place like a pineapple. So yeah, that's what's happened. My hair has literally got thicker. My nails are stronger, etc., etc. But the other thing that's happened is it's like I'm more in tune with my body. It's like the messaging from my digestive system back to my brain is so much better. It's clearer. It's more accurate, and it's also more relaxed. It's very difficult to explain, but it's literally like my digestive system is talking to my brain more effectively.
One of the things I wanted to go back to was where you were talking about when you started to notice things improving. How long after July 4 did you start to notice the improvements happening?
Well, when I went carnivore, I was looking after my youngest son's house. He lives in the Cotswolds, a very famous part of England and quite beautiful. But he was in France at that point in time, cycling on something called the Pan Celtic, which is where you get on a bike, you have no support whatsoever, you cycle 1,400 miles in something like 9 days, and you take all your food with you, you take your sleeping arrangements, you take everything, and you just keep going, and you go up and down mountains. So he was doing that because he's mad, and I was looking after the dog. So I was in his house, and using his air fryer and stuff. And he was serious carnivore at that time. So he was hoping to do this whole thing on butter and meat if he could get it. So there I was in his house, and he had left me a collection of steaks, bacon, eggs. I mean, he left me about 30 eggs, literally. So he'd left me all this stuff prepared. And after about 5 days, I realised that I was more cheerful. And I thought it was the weather. Genuinely thought it was the weather. Because it had gone from being a bit rainy to being sunny. And then then we had a few days where the temperature really dipped and it went grey again. And I realised I continued to be cheerful. And then I realised that actually my hands weren't hurting. So I used to wear compression gloves, the fingerless ones, like a money counter. I used to wear these little things all the time. And I didn't need those anymore. It was really strange. And then I started to realise that I didn't have the acid reflux that I had so much of. I hadn't had I used to get kind of cluster headaches as well as a migraine. I hadn't had a cluster headache. Just all sorts of little things. And to begin with, I thought, no, I'm imagining this. So then I started Googling carnivore and these things. And then I started getting up these YouTube clips of people talking about them. So then I started going and looking at the YouTube clips. And then I was obviously in touch with my son all the time, monitoring his progress. And I was literally tracking him on GPS. And then I started sending him messages. And he was coming back with, yeah, that's actually what happens. Yeah, that does happen. So that's when I started to realise that the old adage of you are what you eat is truer than people realise. And that's when I started to realise that I needed to talk to people about it, because something like this, it's wrong. I mean, I can't help myself trying to help people anyway, probably too much, but it's wrong to withhold information that could genuinely impact the most important thing in anybody's life, which is their health. So, so then I started talking to random people in the street. When you're queuing in a supermarket and people sort of do that, they look at what you've got in your basket and they do that double take, because all you've got in your basket is a stack of steaks, a load of bacon, packs of eggs, and a few cartons of heavy cream. And then when they look, I say, yes, this is all I eat. I don't eat anything else. And do you know what? I'm the healthiest I've ever been. So, yes, I find myself saying things like that, and people suddenly start to sort of back away.
I was going to say, do they engage or back away?
This is not English. This is not English. People don't do this, And if I'm anything, I am very English. So yes.
So you've been doing carnivore for 9 months. It's coming up on a year. Your son's still carnivore. What does your other son think about all this? Is he like...
now that's interesting. So before I move away from youngest, he has a proper job. He works in an area of defence. We'll just leave it at that. But he is building a client base because he is also a qualified personal trainer. And so his website is Metabolic PT. because his belief in the metabolic element of good health, coupled with the exercise, is so great that that's why the metabolic comes before the PT. And he's doing really, really well. And he's working with people who have serious challenges like diabetes and people who have the kind of mental health issues that would, like autism and OCD and that sort of thing, things that people struggle with. So that's what he's doing. So we support each other, and I go off and explore other stuff. So I explore things like amino acids because I'm nerdy. So we've got that going. In the meantime, there's my oldest son, who, as I said, is a paramedic. So my son has been trained and qualified. In the UK, paramedics are quite senior, probably more clinically more senior than they would be in America. And so he's not just a senior paramedic, he's also a teacher. So he teaches and he mentors and trains junior paramedics. He goes with it to a certain extent, but it's difficult for him for a number of reasons to, I think, go to that last step of going carnivore. He can see the advantages, he can see the benefits that we've had. For his lifestyle, he wouldn't go that far, but he does go through phases of keto. And every now and then he will fall off the wagon. You see, for me, that's the problem with keto, is it's easy to fall off the wagon because it so parallels. You know, you're constantly looking for fake versions of the Western diet because it parallels.
It becomes like a little bit of a balancing act where you're like a trapeze artist and you're about to fall at any moment.
Yeah, exactly. So he gets it and he quite understands it. I think he gets irritated sometimes, like when we're out and I'm difficult to serve in places where we might go out to eat. I think that embarrasses him sometimes because my son is a very lovely person. He's very personable. He's perfect at his job because he connects with people really, really well. But he can see it. He has begun to introduce the concept of oxalates and certainly when it comes to things like carbohydrates and fiber, he will talk to some of his patients about that. So he will spread the word, and he certainly follows it himself. So he has removed quite a lot of stuff from his diet that he would normally have followed, set sugar out, and highly refined carbs, for the most part, don't form part of his diet. So yeah, it is interesting. My older sister, who has weight problems, she and I are quite close. She kind of listens. I'm not sure. I think for her, the carb addiction is too great. So with my youngest, he knows that his carb addiction is so great that he can't ever ease a bit. Because if he eases a bit, he's just going to fall off the wagon completely, and that's it. It is a proper addiction for him. I think it would be the same for my sister. I have done things like I've had delivered to her keto recipe books, and in the early days when I was doing the keto thing myself, almond flour and coconut flour and erythritol and all that kind of stuff have just turned up on her doorstep, followed by a little message saying, try the recipe on page so-and-so, because she likes to cook, you know. So she thinks I'm mad. And I mean, genuinely, she has mixed feelings about me. She thinks I'm clever, but she thinks that I am just eccentrically mad. So, yeah.
So, what's your message to someone who has never heard of this before. Maybe they've had a rearrangement themselves, and they've left the hospital and they've been told, eat, a carb heavy diet. What would your advice to them be?
That for you, that may not be the best advice. And if it's not working, and if you are experiencing any of those things that I've described that I had, you can try it. Just try it. And the one thing you can guarantee is that you will get high quality nutrients in a form that your body can use. And that's the most important thing with healing. The most important thing is that you feed your body. I would say the same to people with eating disorders. The most severe form of eating disorder is anorexia nervosa, and it certainly is the highest rate of suicide. Excuse me, my dog is pulling me. The highest rate of suicide is amongst anorexics from mental health disorders. And one of the things that we know is that what happens with the anorexic brain, so any kind of starvation, the anorexic brain, the brain shrinks. And when the brain shrinks, it can't think properly, it can't function properly. So you can't rationalize things. You lose the ability to read emotions facially, that sort of thing. So the messages that you are getting aren't correct. They're false messages. So when somebody smiles at you, you might think they're scowling at you. It's that different. And that doesn't just happen with restricting food. It also happens with restricting nutrition. So all those people out there who are on really bad diets, who might be seriously overweight, who are taking in the volume of the incorrect stuff and not taking in the volume of the nutritionally useful stuff, will have brain shrinkage. So there will be parts of their brain that aren't working properly. It will be difficult for people who are in that situation to be able to appropriately rationalize what we're telling them, what they're hearing. So it is really complex, but the bottom message through all of this is you need to feed the brain and you need to feed your body. And you do that through good nutrition. And where do you find the food that has got the greatest concentration of everything that your body needs, all those essential things and extras? Where do you find that? In meat. So that's what I would say to people who have had a readjustment of gastric arrangement, whether that's upper GI like mine, whether that's lower GI and it's in their intestines, or whether what we're talking about is an eating disorder. That's what I would say. Give meat a try.
Give meat a chance, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Lorna, do you have any social media like a YouTube or an Instagram if people want to get in contact with you?
I don't. I mean, I'm perfectly happy for people to get in touch with me, and I'm perfectly happy for you to publicise my email address if you want to. I don't. I thought about it, and then I thought, I sit and watch these people and listen to them, and I just think they're so good. They're really good at this. What have I got to offer? And so I thought, I've only really got one message, and you've given me the opportunity to broadcast that message. And I think, I think I might just be sort of extraneous. Just there's enough out there. I don't know. My youngest, who obviously has a website for his personal trainer site, who isn't charging at the moment. He's doing what he's doing for love. He writes blogs or articles or stuff, and I have written an article about this on his website. the whole area of cancer and diet or nutrition is a fascinating one. And at the moment, I think we are finding out so much that's just going to completely revolutionize how we treat cancer. We're in the very early stages of it, and it's quite exciting, I think. The problem we have is that it could be jeopardized because of big pharma. There's so much money in drugs, so much money, that if you find a solution to a really big problem like cancer that doesn't involve drugs, then that's a very dangerous place to be for society, I think. So we'll see. Let's kind of watch this space.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that one. But Lorna, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, and sharing such an important message with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.